Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and nearly 7 years ago, I did a video unboxing the original Nintendo Switch. And so today, it only feels right to do a video unboxing the Switch 2, and I'll also be giving some of my initial thoughts and impressions. I got this off Amazon after requesting an invitation to order the Switch 2 weeks ago now. Stock for the Switch 2 thankfully doesn't seem to be too limited from what I've read, although that would very much depend on where you live and just general luck. But if you're hoping to get a Switch 2, just keep diligent, keep looking for them. Eventually it will be available sooner or later. Please do not give your money to a scalper. It is ridiculous how much some of these are going for on eBay. Trust me, this is not a PS5 situation where these are nigh on impossible to find. So it is in high demand, but Nintendo seemingly has done a pretty decent job with inventory. Just keep looking, you'll get one eventually. But let's get right into the unboxing, and then I'll give some of my impressions and whether or not I think right now the Switch 2 is worth buying. Here we have the Switch 2 box, which is about as straightforward as it gets. I got the Mario Kart bundle since it was the one Amazon let me buy. Opening the box is easy, and once we're inside, we're immediately presented with the Switch 2 itself, as well as the included Joy-Cons, all wrapped up in plastic. The Switch 2 is definitely bigger. Even putting my OLED Switch next to it, which was larger than the original, won't be fitting this thing in your pockets, that's for sure. It's pretty sleek. The new kickstand did feel a little flimsy to me still, but it is much better than the original Switch kickstand, so I'll take it. Here we have the Joy-Cons, and visually they're quite similar looking to the old ones, just with this matte black color. They're a bit larger, and of course they're all magnetic now. Lifting this off, we get our Mario Kart World download code. Excited to try that out. Here we have our Joy-Con grip, which is basically identical to the old one that was also pre-included. These are nice to have, but I do wish they included the one that has the battery inside to charge your Joy-Cons rather than selling it separately. Then we have our HDMI cable here. Sorry, ultra high-speed HDMI cable. Very fancy. Then we've also got our bumpers, our 60-watt USB-C charging brick, which is an upgrade over the 39-watt adapter with the original Switch, which I believe also wasn't detachable, so that's nice. And of course, there's the USB-C cable itself. Then we finally have the included TV dock. It's pretty bulky with this sort of chunky rounded plastic, and the back pops off really easily. Honestly, in the hand it feels a bit cheap to me, but it's not like it does much except sit on your entertainment unit anyways, so it's fine. We've got a port for the AC adapter, HDMI, and a LAN Ethernet, so good setup here. You'll want to be careful when you place your Switch 2 on the dock that you don't end up scratching the display, though you should be fine if you're keeping things clean and free of debris, and you're not just jamming the thing on there haphazardly. But a tempered glass screen protector on the Switch is probably a good idea to play it safe, so I'll link one from Amazon in the description. Trying out these new bumpers, I'm not really sure how to feel about them. On one hand, the way they magnetically attach is awesome, and much nicer than sliding them on and off, especially since you can't put them on the wrong way, which previously could result in them getting stuck. But there's no extension for the triggers, which lie fairly flat. Might be a bit of an adjustment if you're used to the older setup when playing Mario Kart or whatever with a single Joy-Con controller, which you'll probably want to do if you have friends over. Thankfully, your old Switch controllers are compatible with the Switch 2, though the Joy-Cons obviously won't attach to the console itself. They're only usable wirelessly, and then you'll need to also charge them on the older system or with a Joy-Con battery grip. But let's actually get this system set up, and then I'll give a few of my thoughts on it. It starts by getting you to click on the Joy-Cons, and man, does this ever feel good to do. I'd say it's far more convenient than sliding the Joy-Cons on and off on the old Switch. I really like it. The setup process is very straightforward. I chose my language and region, and then definitely read the terms and conditions before accepting them because I'm not a psychopath. We're then prompted to connect to Wi-Fi, so I did that, and it began downloading a system update in the background. We choose our time zone, then we're shown a little tutorial on how to detach the Joy-Cons. There's a release you press, and then you can simply pull it off the console. It's very intuitive. From here, I skipped connecting it to my TV as well as the guide for the attachments. I know what I'm doing, and the system finished updating and rebooted. Now, we can either transfer over our data from our previous Switch or set it up as a fresh device. I'm just going to start fresh for now, but later I did end up going back and transferring over my OLED Switch data. Either way, you'll be prompted to insert an SD card if you have one, which needs to be micro SD Express. Then you can sign into your Nintendo account, and eventually we ended up at the home screen, which looks extremely familiar. First impressions of the software is it's very basic and boring, but also functional, just like what we have on the first Switch. At this point, I actually ended up resetting my Switch 2 again to move over everything from my OLED Switch, which really didn't take too long, and I started downloading Mario Kart World. We're gonna now move into my initial quick review of the Switch 2. I may end up doing a full separate review at some point, but I did want to give some of my thoughts, especially coming off of the OLED Switch, which is still pretty great, and I would say most people with an OLED Switch, you may not need to upgrade yet, unless of course you want to, but the Switch 2. The Switch 2 feels very big, and that's because it is. We're looking at a 7.9-inch LCD 1080p display running at 120 Hz, which means up to 120 frames per second versus only 60 on previous Switch models. Not too many games are actually going to play at that frame rate, but it's still a nice inclusion. The colors definitely don't pop as much as they do on the OLED Switch, and if you've got the OLED right now and are torn about upgrading, I wouldn't blame you for holding off at the moment. I'd imagine we'll see an OLED Switch 2 in a couple years or something, who knows, but the LCD is still very sharp and it looks great, so I wouldn't consider it a downgrade. The bezels are surprisingly chunky, I will say. I'm a little bit disappointed with that, but it's not a big deal really. Thankfully, on the whole, the console doesn't feel too chunky or heavy. It's not really any thicker than my OLED model, despite being way more powerful, so that is impressive. Of course, the physical footprint has grown substantially, and that's fine. I'm okay with that, I think. I mean, you can see compared to my OLED Switch, it's significantly larger. It's not at all, for me at least, uncomfortable to hold and use portably. I think even if you had fairly small hands, it feels pretty good to me, which is exactly what you want from a console like this. Now, the battery life is unfortunately very mediocre, with like similar numbers to the original 2017 Switch, which was not very good. We're looking at like 2 to 6.5 hours of battery life. That means you might not get much more than a couple hours of life for more intense 3D games like Cyberpunk or Zelda, whereas light titles like Stardew Valley might get around 6 hours. It's the problem with the hardware and display getting better, but it's also a significant downgrade from my OLED Switch, which I found would last at least 4 hours even in big games like, say, Tears of the Kingdom. It's a notable downside of the Switch 2 as it stands right now. Battery life just isn't very good, and for some users, it might be worth waiting a couple years in hopes that whatever updated model comes next will maybe improve the battery life just like we saw with the first Switch. The Joy-Cons feel great, I really like them, and on the whole, this really is just the same Nintendo Switch experience, but a bit more refined and more powerful. While this is great, because the Switch 1 was great, it's hard to blame anyone who is a bit disappointed by the lack of change. The fact is, we've waited 8 years for Nintendo to make a new console that ultimately doesn't really feel like an actual new console, but it's what's on the inside that really matters. The first Switch was absurdly underpowered, and it's honestly a miracle you could even run games like Tears to begin with. So not only are we getting more intensive games on the Switch 2 with better graphics, but also a better gameplay experience with previous titles that are all backwards compatible. All your Switch 1 games will work on the Switch 2, and that is awesome. Now, some games are also enhanced and require a separate purchase for the upgrade, or you get it for free if you have the Nintendo Online subscription with the expansion pass. This is incredibly stupid, by the way, and just a purely greedy move on Nintendo's end. For example, plenty of games have visual upgrades on PS5 versus PS4, but Sony doesn't charge extra for them. It's extremely stupid Nintendo is doing this. Not much else to say about it, as much as I am excited to play Breath of the Wild on the more powerful hardware. You can still play the games without purchasing the enhancements, and there will be some benefits like a more stable frame rate and faster load times, but it'll be capped at 30 FPS rather than 60 FPS, and still at the lower resolution. Yeah, it's dumb, but I'll still be giving Nintendo my money for it anyways, because it probably is worth it even if it should be free. Now, of course, a big thing going into buying a Switch 2 is whether or not you really like Nintendo games. If Nintendo games don't really appeal to you, then something like a Steam Deck might make more sense. Myself, I'm not really a huge Nintendo fan. I grew up on PlayStation and Xbox, though I have plenty of fond memories playing the Wii at friends' places. But what really appeals to me about Nintendo is that their consoles are easily the best when it comes to multiplayer couch co-op. And while I'm probably not going to play too much of Mario Kart World solo, it's definitely going to be played a lot with my friends, and I'm really looking forward to it. There's something so special about playing split-screen games with a bunch of buddies, and you're just not going to get that same experience from PC, Xbox, PlayStation. Nintendo, when it comes to in-person multiplayer, is in a league of its own. There aren't a ton of games out for the Switch 2 yet, although of course all those Switch 1 games are compatible. I did purchase Cyberpunk 2077. It hasn't come in yet, but I am quite excited to see how that performs on here. I played it back in the day before all the DLCs, so interested to see how it's improved. Now, one thing to note is the game situation for Switch 2 is a bit odd. Some games you buy in store will come with a physical cartridge, but it actually doesn't have the game on the cartridge, but instead instead a key for the game, so you still have to download it onto the Switch itself. And this is stupid. That's really the way to put it. Some games do have the game on the cartridge, like Cyberpunk, and I believe all of Nintendo's titles will be on the cartridge. But if you're looking to get a game, I would look into it before buying the physical release, because what is even the point of buying the physical copy if the game's not actually on it? Something I thought I'd mention, I think it's worth being aware of. It's made worse because while the Switch 2 does come with 256 gigs, which is far more than the first Switch, the games themselves have also gotten bigger. Mario Kart World is about 22 gigabytes, which isn't too bad, but a game like Cyberpunk is 64 gigs, so if you download a few big games like that, you'll suddenly be full for storage, at least without a micro SD card. Now, a micro SD card is an investment you might want to make, but they are quite expensive right now as the Switch 2 uses specifically micro SD Express cards, which are higher speed and relatively new to the market. I will link one off Amazon in the description below as an example. You need to make sure you get the right card or it just won't work. Look for the little EX logo on the card itself. The good news is that load speeds are very fast, faster than the first Switch for sure, whether playing off the console itself or expandable memory. And hey, my actual gameplay experience thus far has been great. Mario Kart World looks and runs fantastically, no complaints. I think the big question for a lot of people really comes down to whether or not they should buy the Switch 2 now or wait. This console isn't cheap, starting at $450 US or $500 for the Mario Kart World bundle, which is probably worth it to save $30 on Mario Kart if you were going to buy it anyways, though it is of course the download code and not the physical cartridge. Pricing may vary by region as well. For example, in Canada, this whole package cost me almost $800 with taxes. Definitely not a cheap system, and is it worth that? Well, on one hand, the reality is that the Switch 2 really doesn't have very many games right now, and even some games coming later this year, like the new Pokemon title, is still coming to the Switch 1 as well. On the other hand, if you're like me and you're gonna buy the Switch 2 at some point anyways, I don't really see any reason not to get it once you can find it available in stock, assuming you have the money for it. If you play your original Switch a lot still, assuming you have one, this will play all those same games but faster and better. Performance will be much more stable. It is way more powerful, like it's not even hardly comparable. And it's likely going to be a long while before we see any price reductions or new models coming out, so now really does seem like the time to pick one of these up. If you're maybe looking to get one for your kids at Christmas, I wouldn't wait too long, since I'd imagine availability once we get to the holiday season is probably going to be pretty scarce just going by historical trends. There is a very real possibility Nintendo could do a minor refresh to the hardware in a couple years or so that might bring better battery life, or maybe we see an OLED Switch 2 at some point, probably a Switch 2 Lite, I'd imagine. And if you're not too eager for any of the new games, or you're plenty happy with your current Switch, then it might be worth waiting to see what happens. And there are always options like the Steam Deck if you're, again, not really into Nintendo games to begin with. This isn't a full review, and whether or not it's going to be worth buying is up to you. For me, I think it was, especially since I can use it for the channel and make some videos out of it. Gotta love those tax write-offs. But if I didn't have the channel, considering I still have my OLED Switch 1, I probably wouldn't have bought this quite yet, just because I don't think I really needed it. But again, I am really looking forward to playing Mario Kart with my buddies on here. It should be great. On the whole, I am very much whelmed by the Nintendo Switch 2. It's not great, but it's not bad either. It's fine, it's good. It's an acceptable new generation of Switch that brings some desperately needed improvements to the power. And the display looks great too. That first Switch is brutally underpowered. We're talking like below an iPhone 7 in terms of raw horsepower. It's a miracle it's lasted this long. So I am very happy to have this new system, and I'm really looking forward to playing it in the coming days and weeks. I'll likely do a longer full review at some point here if you guys want to see that, and if you do, hit that like button maybe, and consider subscribing for more tech content. But yeah, that is about it for me today. I just wanted to do a quick unboxing because why not? It's fun, as well as some of my initial impressions. I really wouldn't feel too bad if you're not getting one quite yet. You're really not missing out on a whole lot. It's just a more powerful Switch, which thankfully is exactly what I wanted anyways. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. I am Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.